So yeah, we're going to be talking about how to support neurodivergent students. All right. Do you want to go through the session?
Yeah, so just to kind of set you up for what to expect in today's session, we're going to kind of frame the session for you, and kind of establish the why we're talking about this. We'll talk about the value of EdTech integration into the classroom, especially as it relates to students with special needs and neurodivergency. We'll then talk about how using Edpuzzle to support those students. And then we'll talk a little bit about, the what AI means to like time-saving adaptations, and then finally leading into some practical application, some takeaways, and then some Q&A and wrap up at the end.
So first, we're going to start by framing the session with a little bit of terminology. I have a bell curve on the screen that essentially shows the center of the bell curve, the average person, the neurotypical person in the center, and then on both edges of the bell curve, you have neurodivergent individuals. It's important to acknowledge that being neurodivergent means being both above and below average for certain aspects of either your skills and abilities. And what we're trying to do is to essentially expand this orange box with different classroom adaptations to better support all students. Because also, as we know, when you better support neurodivergent students or students with disabilities, there are ways to better support all students. Something that I learned teaching at Landmark was Brown's model of executive function. And executive functions are the cognitive processes that regulate an individual's ability to sustain self-directed work. But one of the most powerful things for me with this model is the idea that you can kind of break down the places where students get stuck on things. And it's really helpful to consider as a student is going through something, an activity, where they might get stuck. Because I have many students who know the content, but they're not turning their work in and they're getting stuck along the way. Taking a non-academic example for this, because executive functions play out both in terms of the classroom and outside the classroom, I like to share an example of my dad and his jewelry business. So my dad has been polishing stones since he was in high school. You can estimate how long that's been. He loves collecting rough rocks and going to events and buying stones. He loves polishing stones. That's his comfort zone. But he doesn't like the metalwork that goes along with it, and he doesn't feel as confident with the metalwork, and so he doesn't have a lot of completed jewelry. If he was in a classroom being graded for his jewelry completion, he would not do very well, even though I have to admit I'm biased, but he does really nice work. And I see this play out in the classroom all the time with my students, where I see them working on a worksheet but they get stuck on something and they say, I'm not turning this in. They'd rather get a 0 on an assignment than actually turn it in and be judged for it. And so there are strategies, including the use of Edpuzzle, to help to overcome those places where students can get stuck.
Great. So when we talk about tools and supports that we use in the classroom, we have to consider intentional design, right? So choosing the right tool, it isn't about just about convenience or engagement, right? It's about the intentionality behind that tool. And for students with disabilities and neurodivergent learners, there are a few things that we need to consider when we think about tools and supports using, that we're going to use in the classroom. The first being flexibility, right? Like we know that students need options for how they access content and how they respond to content, right? They need structure, something that's predictable, scaffolded experiences, right? That help reduce anxiety and that support that executive functioning. And then finally, they need accessibility, right? Videos that can be captioned and translated and slowed down, right? Interactive elements that keep students focused and provide real-time data for teachers to intervene and to intervene early. And that's what we will hopefully talk about today by, by using Edpuzzle, how we as educators can shift from reactive support to a more proactive, inclusive design, and hopefully in the process save time and maximize that impact for students. Next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about the value of EdTech integration in not just a special ed classroom, but any classroom. Do you want to go to the next slide, Kristen? All right, so educational technology, when it's thoughtfully selected and integrated, can really be a powerful equalizer in the classroom. Tools like Edpuzzle, right, like offer multiple ways for students to not only engage, but like to present and assess learning, while also, meeting the diverse needs of students with disabilities and neurodivergent learners. Some of the things that they offer, right? Like this personalized pacing where it allows students to pause and rewatch or skip ahead, right? Giving them ultimate control of how they consume the content. And this is especially helpful for students who may have some processing concerns, right? They need additional time to really process that information, right? And to reduce that cognitive load. Another way is the multimodal learning, right? The ability to not only see the visuals, the audio, the text, there's some interactive supports, right? It helps address the needs of not only students that have, like ADHD or dyslexia, but also students who might struggle with auditory processing challenges. And then finally, we talked about like the reduced executive function demands, right? Embedding questions. And there's been research behind this, right? Embedding questions directly into videos and helping break down the tasks into more manageable parts, keep students really engaged, right? Without the need to toggle between multiple tools or instructions or platforms. Um, so do you want to go to the next slide, Kristen? And how we'll talk about how this kind of feeds into this idea of, oh, I think you skipped one. Go back. Yeah. Into universal design for learning, right? So when we look at Edpuzzle, right, we see that the tool really, helps exemplify some of these UDL principles, right, by offering not only like the flexibility, right, with how content is presented, but like how students engage like with the material and how they then demonstrate that knowledge and the understanding of learning. And so when you're looking at the three kind of main pillars of UDL, which is the engagement component, the why of the learning, the representation, which is the what of learning, and then the action and expression, which is the how of learning, you can see how these things are represented, right? So with engagement, students can revisit the content, right, at their own pace. And this in turn builds their confidence and autonomy with completing tasks in the classroom. You can also differentiate assignments based on interest or readiness. For representation, right? Content can be visual, it can be auditory, it can be text-based. Teachers can add captions. We can do voiceovers within the platform, or provide visual cues, right, to make content more accessible to all of our learners in a given setting. And then finally, for the action and expression, Edpuzzle helps support different response types, which is important, right? We know so much about the power of choice in the classroom with students. And this could look like multiple choice questions. It looks like open-ended questions, even like verbal responses, right? Giving students the ability to show, what they know in a variety of ways. Next slide. And so this all kind of sets the frame, right, for inclusive design. And I really like this visual here. So we see UDL, right, as the tool that sets the framework, right? It's a proactive blueprint for designing instruction that meets the needs of all learners in the classroom. Again, emphasizing those multiple means of representation, engagement, and expression right from the start, right? Not, this is again, not a reactionary framework. This is very much a proactive mindset going into the classroom. Accessibility then ensures that everyone can participate, right? It focuses on removing barriers to access, such as providing captions, like screen reader capability, minimizing sensory overload. It is really the technical and the practical application that ensures that all students can interact with the content equitably. And then finally, like, the intentional design, right, ties it all together. It means that it's been thoughtfully, like, you've selected the tools and strategies that support both UDL and accessibility principles. And the question isn't just like what's new, right? Like it's like what works for the widest range of learners in the most inclusive way. And then, together, we hope that these concepts, right, create this learning environment that not only honors, the things we always talk about, right? Student voice, choice, autonomy in the classroom. We want to reduce the frustration and the cognitive load for students. We want to increase engagement and independence in learning. And then finally, like, combine compliance with compassion and instructional practices, right? Next slide.
All right, so now we're going to go through some examples of how Edpuzzle can be used to support neurodivergent learners. So the more I learn about teaching neurodivergent individuals, the more I'm fascinated by the research. And one of the things that I find really interesting about the research into neurodivergent individuals is this idea that they experience the world differently. There wasn't really a good visual for all of the things that how to capture all of these things, but this is just an eye tracking um, example showing that individuals with autism might focus on something different. But in addition to that, the way that individuals that are neurodivergent, their senses experience the world is different. And in some cases, speeding up or slowing down videos can really help with capturing their attention and allowing them to experience the world in the way that they do best. And that's and this incorporation of changing the speed isn't just to, get through the video as quickly as possible, but there's actual science involved in the reasons why a student might benefit more from a different speed of a video. And Kristen already mentioned closed captioning as well, enabling that. And I hear time and time again that closed captioning benefits everyone. There are so many people that are able to focus more because they're able to watch the closed captioning as well. And we've touched upon cognitive load. One of the really nice things about Edpuzzle videos is everything is embedded into the video. So the student doesn't have to dig through their backpack to find their worksheets or flip through the textbook to find the right section. It's all there. And that really allows the student to focus on the intrinsic load, the complexity of information. I teach chemistry. Chemistry is not easy. I want to do everything that I can to minimize the extraneous load, and Edpuzzle does a really great job of doing that. And one of my former students who just graduated just sent me this article a couple days ago from the Journal of Chemical Education that talked about this idea that assigning videos is not enough. You need to have those embedded questions, and that's really how learning takes place. The passive video watching doesn't really trigger that learning. And so I thought it was appropriate to include this because it was a very timely discussion that he had attended. And I'm going to turn over to Kristen.
So Chris and I talked about some of the embedded supports within the platform, but these are just a few more, right? And we look to see that they have multiple means of scaffolding, right? The content, we're able to chunk content in more manageable pieces for students. Um, and this is great because, like, as a former elementary teacher, I use Edpuzzle so much in my classroom, but I also used it when I was teaching students at the college level too, right? These intern teachers, and it's not just a support we think for like, right, like students, younger students. It's really a support for students of any age. So having the ability to chunk content, these are, like Kristen already mentioned, we've said like embedded supports already within the tool. There's no need to go find like an extension, right, or an add-on or something for that. It's all within the same platform, which is really helpful. We have the ability to do the teacher voiceovers, right? Which just makes it a little bit more personalized when students are able to hear your voice as the teacher. Especially, I used it quite a bit when we were out for COVID, right? And just having that ability to connect a little bit more with students who didn't get to see me regularly face to face. And then we have the differentiated pathways as well. Next slide. Oh, there we go. So when we think about scaffolds too, we want to think about the social emotional learning, right? Scaffolds. These are just equally critical, especially for neurodivergent students who may experience emotional dysregulation, right? Anxiety or difficulty with self-monitoring. Um, as a former elementary teacher, I always tried to get more bang for my buck, right? And tried to app smash whenever I could. And so I've been working at an organization like Common Sense, right? Like when I present, we use Edpuzzle sometimes in our presentations just to show the capabilities and some of the accessibility features, because I think that's so huge. It's that we want teachers to see that it's just not something else to put on your plate, right? This is something when we're talking about UDL and proactive intentional design, right? That we want teachers to be able to do. And so one of the things that you could do with our content, which if you're not familiar with Common Sense Media, we are a nonprofit based here in California, educational nonprofit. We do a lot of work with parents and schools and advocacy efforts, just to make sure that we are providing the best resources to families and teachers, right? And to help students thrive, right, in a digital age. And so we offer all this curriculum for free, K-12. And one of the resources on our website is our SEL and Digital Life Resource Center, which I really, especially as a former elementary educator, really appreciated. And these lessons are so great, right? Like, when you're working for a district that is asking you to incorporate SEL, but maybe they haven't given you an official curriculum at this point. They haven't provided a lot of resources. They just kind of give you the mandate that says, hey, like you need to teach SEL now, like here you go. Which is the case many of the times. I know that was with the district I worked for. But we have the opportunity to use SEL check-ins, provide that practice for emotional literacy, build self-awareness and mindfulness, regulate emotions, and it's really great to be able to ask questions within Edpuzzle, right, as we're doing some of these SEL lessons, and have them do a lot of self-reflection, like what emotions are you bringing into today's learning, right? Or having them think about like what strategy might help you stay focused during this video, right? Or what did you learn about empathy or perspective taking, right, after watching this? All right, next slide, Kristen.
Almost time.
All right, now we're going to talk about some time-saving adaptations with AI. Sorry, I'm click happy. I'm just trying to monitor the chat as well. But Manny is on it, and he put the link to our slides, and so you'll have the resources available. So thank you, Manny, for that. So some of the newer features as of last year for Edpuzzle include AI grading, where for open-ended questions you can ask it, you can give your preferred answer and then have it auto grade. And there are definitely folks out there that say, oh, auto grading makes you seem lazy and all these things, but it really frees you up to focus on what matters, which is engaging with the students and giving feedback to the students who, if they didn't get the right answer, then you have more time to focus on those students as opposed to grading the same thing over and over again. And I found it to be a really nice thing. Obviously with AI, you have to double check it, but it's something that really does streamline the process. And a lot of times I'll type in, multiple examples. So if the answer is zinc, then I might also put in zinc or ZN and give it some alternative ways that students might respond to things. In addition, there's also an AI question generator, which you can use with any video that has a transcript. I think that we all want to mix up our content, but we don't always have the time to do so. And especially if we find a video that doesn't already have embedded questions, then using the AI question generator as a start is such a time saver. And it also expands the types of questions that you ask your students and to be more creative. We all have some bias as educators, the content that we pay more attention to, but if you can use the AI question generator, then it expands the types of questions that you ask the students, which is always valuable as well. And I think we're almost done because I know we're almost out of time, but I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen.
So I won't repeat what Chris has already talked about AI, just repurposing, the time we have with students and freeing us up for more face-to-face time with our kids. I will say that AI is a tool, it's not a teacher, right? The human element is going to remain central in whatever AI product you choose to use. But it just enhances our ability to be more present and responsive and intentional with students, right? Repurposing time with AI means more opportunities for us to build relationships and adapt instruction and really understand the whole child. Next slide.
So we want to end with a call to action. So, teaching at Landmark and having all of my students neurodivergent, there are times when I have to make decisions about, reasonable versus unreasonable accommodations. And one of the deans who retired recently gave me the advice that you have to think about whether you are moving an entire parking spot to accommodate a student or shifting the parking spot. And so if you can find ways to shift the parking spot in your classroom to make it more accessible and shift that needle, that will always improve your teaching, whether you're working with students with disabilities or whether you're working with your general students. So just think about ways that you can think to move the parking spot in your own classes. And with that, we will transition to questions and wrap up.
Ooh. Well, thank you. I do want to, where is my screen? We have a Neurodivergent Minds and Edpuzzle certification. In Edpuzzle already. Let me see. I am sharing the wrong screen. I don't think I'm sharing anything. Aye. This is wrong. Okay, so here it is. I'm gonna share it. I'm in the landing page. You go to professional where all our certifications will be there. I'm giving you time hint to put questions in the chat. All our certification will be here. There's no need to be switching back and forth between student and teacher anymore. Discover courses. The premium ones are on the top, but the free ones will be down here along with the coach and things, but here it is: empowering neurodivergent minds in Edpuzzle.